거거든. 딱히 빼고 나무 가다가 먹어도 나오다 ቁጭ거다 아니 mà cái này mẹ hơn để cái bác ra cái nó một cái giỏ ôi bữa đâu Kenapa kita kemana? Oh, không apa ano bakit nagkataon mo ba? Bakit Bravo.
There's a beautiful shot of the Bösendorfer 225 SP. Beautiful work of art. And of course featuring the distinctive 4 extra notes on this particular model. Of course it goes to the A, and then we've got the 4 extra notes. We can use the wireless technology of any CVP 605 or 609 to turn it into a Bösendorfer 225 using a new app that's simply placed in the lower cheek block of the clavinova. The 4 requisite notes are added by the app, and wirelessly the clavinova is able to
So here's C0. Here's Here's B. Here is B flat. And here is A. We're about to leave the realm of normal pianos. Here is A flat 0. Here is G 0. Here is F sharp. Here is F. Here is E. Here is E flat. Here is D. Here is D flat. And here is C 0. So as you can tell, especially when you get down to the very
Hello, this is a concert tuning of a Bösendorfer Imperial Grand. It's made in about 1975 and fully restored. And it's a piano that we have in stock. It's in this church building.
Think about polygons. What is a polygon? A polygon is a flat two-dimensional or 2D shape with straight sides that is fully closed. All the sides must be joined up. The sides must be straight. Polygons may have a number of sides. We can have regular and irregular polygons. A regular polygon is a polygon in which all sides are the same length and at the same angles. An irregular polygon is a polygon with sides and or angles of differing lengths and sizes, although they must still be straight and joined up. Some common polygons include triangles with 3 sides, quadrilaterals, 4 sides, pentagons, 5 sides, hexagons, 6 sides, heptagons, 7 sides, octagons, 8 sides, nonagons, 9 sides, and decagons, 10 sides. Some extra facts about polygons that you may need to remember are: a regular quadrilateral has a special name. It is called a square. There are different types of triangles. An equilateral triangle is a regular triangle. and a right angle triangle and an isosceles triangle are examples of irregular triangles or irregular polygons. It is important to remember that all the internal angles of a regular polygon are equal. The size of each of the interior angle of a regular polygon equals n take away 2 times 180 degrees divided by n, where n is the number of sides. So, for example, a regular pentagon has 5 sides. Using the formula above, 5 minus 2 equals 3. 3 times 180 degrees equals 540. 540 divided by the 5 sides equals 108 degrees. I hope you enjoyed learning all about polygons. If you have any questions, please comment below. We would love you to subscribe, and don't forget that we've just released a new Alexa skill. Just search High 5 Maths or check the description for the link.
Of our music using only 12 unique notes: C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, and B. Of course, on an instrument like the piano, we have far more than 12 keys to play, but each of these keys is just a different version of one of those 12 unique pitch classes. However, like I explored in my previous video on microtonality, there are actually more than 12 unique pitch classes that we could choose from. Notes like C half sharp, or C half flat. In fact, pitch is a spectrum with arguably an infinite amount of different notes available, so why do we only use these 12? Well, the first thing to bear in mind here is that these notes weren't selected for their particular frequencies. The frequencies themselves aren't actually the important thing when it comes to making music. For example, we could sharpen all of these pitches, and as long as we sharpen them all by the same amount, the piano will still sound just as harmonious as usual. It's not the frequencies of the notes that are important, it's the intervals between those frequencies. A melody isn't really a sequence of notes, but a sequence of intervals. Twinkle Twinkle Little Star isn't defined by being these notes, or even these frequencies, but by being these intervals. You can choose any pitch for the first note, and then as long as you apply this order of intervals, you'll get Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. That's why if we transpose a song to a different key, it will still sound like the same song. So, going back to the initial question, why does Western music only use 12 notes? Well, put shortly, it's because these 12 notes are the most practical and effective way to play all of the intervals that we find useful for music making. So, what are these useful intervals? And why is 12 notes in an octave the best way to access them? Even though musical intervals are technically subjective, most humans will agree on the same handful of pitches as the most consonant, as the most pleasing and musical. It's widely accepted that the octave is the most consonant and most important interval in music. Notes an octave apart sound so good together, so complementary, that they are actually perceived as deeper or higher versions of the exact same note. This is called octave equivalence, and is why notes an octave apart are given the exact same name as each other, for example, A and A. The interval of an octave is also the simplest relationship we can have between the two frequencies. To go up an octave, all you have to do is double the frequency. So an octave up from 220 Hz is 440 Hz, a 2-to-1 relationship. This also means that a string that is half the length of another will sound exactly an octave higher, as it will vibrate twice as fast. Because notes an octave apart are perceived as different versions of the same note, most tuning systems around the world, including the Western 12-tone system, prioritize the octave and then find a way to divide the octave up into different notes. The Western way of dividing the octave into 12 different notes does a great job of allowing us access to our most important musical intervals. So let's go through those intervals now and add them onto this keyboard. The next two most consonant intervals are generally considered to be the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth. Now, of course, we're only really choosing these intervals because they just sound nice to our ears. However, interestingly, just like how the octave had a simple relationship between its two frequencies, the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth also have very simple relationships between the two notes. To go up an octave, we multiply the frequency by 2. Instead, for a perfect fifth, we multiply it by 1.5. Or for a perfect fourth, we multiply it by 1 1/3. Of course, like I said before, we're not consciously choosing these intervals because of these simple relationships, but it turns out that the more consonant an interval sounds to us, the simpler the relationship between its two notes. And this, as you would imagine, is not a coincidence. When two frequencies are related to each other by a simple relationship, like 2 to 1, the wavelengths of those frequencies are going to perfectly line up, perfectly synchronize. And it's generally considered that this perfect alignment of the frequencies is why these intervals are perceived as consonant to us, why they're perceived as harmonious. If we play two notes that don't synchronize together like this, you can hear the dissonance. The octave, the perfect fifth, and the perfect fourth are widely considered the most consonant and pleasing intervals. After these three, though, the order in which different people may rank the remaining intervals will start to vary. However, it will generally follow an order similar to this: the major third, the minor third, the major sixth, and the minor sixth. And as you may have guessed, these intervals once again have simple relationships to the initial note. So we now have all of the intervals that are generally considered consonant. The remaining intervals offered in the 12-tone Western system are considered to be dissonant, but this doesn't mean that they're not useful to us. Although dissonance in music seems like something you'd want to avoid, music without any dissonance at all may sound pleasant, but will lack any drama or suspense. It won't have a sense of tension and release. So let's add these traditionally more dissonant intervals. These are the tone, or major second, the minor seventh, the tritone, the major seventh, and the semitone, or minor second. So these are the 12 intervals available to us in the Western 12-tone system. But why can't we just add a couple extra pitches in between a few of these? For example, a neutral third, which would be between the major and minor third. Or we could have a note between the major seventh and the octave, creating a sort of ultra seventh or ultra leading tone. The thing is though, we can't really just add these two extra microtonal intervals and leave it at that. This is because it's quite important that the notes between the octave are more or less equally spaced. This allows us to easily play in different keys, and generally makes the instrument much easier to play. With the standard 12 pitches in the octave, the notes are naturally spaced at fairly equal distances from each other. But if we add just a couple microtonal notes in like this, it will destroy that equal spacing. If we're going to add more notes beyond the standard 12, we will need to find an alternative way to evenly divide up the octave, which can still allow us to play all of the most important intervals, like the perfect fifth, the perfect fourth, etc. 19 notes in the octave is a fairly good alternative. 19 evenly spaced notes in the octave still allows us to play our most important intervals, like the perfect fifth, the perfect fourth, etc., whilst also allowing us to access a whole range of other microtonal notes. Another option is to have 24 notes in the octave, adding a new microtonal note between each of our standard 12 pitches. This of course maintains all of our standard intervals, whilst adding a whole range of new microtonal notes. Some musicians have written music using systems like these. Ivan Wisniewski, for example, developed a quarter-tone piano, which features 24 notes per octave. But as you can see, having access to these extra notes makes the instrument significantly more confusing to play. Even though 19 notes per octave or 24 notes per octave allow us to play a whole range of additional microtonal intervals, I think most musicians would agree that these extra microtonal notes are not useful enough to warrant reducing the playability of our instruments. Of course, some instruments like the violin or the trombone don't have to be modified to access the notes between the standard 12, but instruments like these are still built to optimize 12 notes in an octave. The instrument's design, size, and shape are all dictated by making sure the instrument can comfortably access 12 notes in the octave. The design of a musical instrument has to strike a compromise between being comfortable and practical to play and having access to as many notes as possible. And it turns out that over the centuries, we've come to this conclusion that 12 notes in an octave, repeating up and down the keyboard, is the best solution to this compromise. 12 notes in an octave is the best way to access the most consonant and useful musical intervals, whilst also optimizing the playability of our instrument.
Lomba cuci piring antibakteri. Sabun cuci ekonomis lawan Lifebuoy pencuci piring.
Optimizing the playability of our instruments. So that's it, right? We found our 12 notes. So we can now just double each of those frequencies to give us another set an octave up, and we can half them to get another set an octave down. And if we do that a couple more times, we wind up with the full span of a modern piano. Job's a good one, right? Well, not quite. There is one more topic left to discuss: temperament. See, right now, we've tuned our instrument to what's called just intonation. Our intervals are tuned to perfect ratios, which is ultimately the purest way to tune an interval. But even though this is the purest way to tune our intervals, it presents a problem. Do you remember when I mentioned earlier that our notes need to be evenly spaced if we're going to be able to play in different keys? Well, even though the 12 notes of just intonation are fairly equally distanced from each other, they are not perfectly evenly spaced. This is because each interval was tuned using a different ratio away from the root. For example, the fifth between the A and the E is a perfect 3-to-2 relationship. And this does mean if we play some music in the key of A major, it's going to sound really pure and perfect. However, if I try playing in a different key, E flat major for example, things are not going to sound quite as harmonious. The problem here is even though this perfect fifth between the A and the E was a perfect 3-to-2 relationship, the perfect fifth between the E flat and the B flat is not. When you change the key, you're effectively changing the root. So unless you're going to retune your instrument relative to that new root every time you change key, other keys are going to just sound out of tune. This is really limiting, right? We want our instrument to be able to sound good in any key, not to mention being able to play chromatically outside of the key. So how can we fix this? Well, with something called temperament. If we want to be able to play in various keys on one instrument and play chromatic music that goes outside of the key, we're going to have to adjust or temper some of these intervals. The way in which you adjust these intervals to make the tuning more versatile is called temperament. And across history, various temperaments have been used, which each find their own way of striking a compromise between preserving how these intervals should sound and being able to play in different keys and tonalities. The system that we use today, which has almost been universally adopted, is called 12-tone equal temperament. 12-tone equal temperament makes sure that every note is the exact same distance from every other note. So in equal temperament, a perfect fifth between A and E will sound just as in tune as a perfect fifth between B flat and F, or D and A, or E and B. The way this is achieved is, instead of tuning every interval as a perfect ratio, we just tune the octave as a pure ideal ratio, and then we divide the space between each octave into 12 equally spaced notes. This division does a pretty amazing job of approximating these intervals. But of course, apart from the octave, the intervals in 12-tone equal temperament music are no longer exactly perfect ratios, and therefore slightly out of tune. Some equal tempered intervals are only slightly different from their pure intonation counterparts. For example, the perfect fifth and the perfect fourth are only 1.96 cent away from their ideal tuning. However, some of these intervals are quite significantly sharper or flatter. An equal tempered major third, for example, is over 13 cents sharper than it would be in pure intonation. You can hear this difference most distinctly in chords. If I play a C major chord in our usual 12-tone equal temperament, you'll hear a wah 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 sound, because the three pitches of the chord are not perfectly in tune with each other. This wah wah sound is called beating. However, if I tune the C major chords to just intonation, this beating sound disappears. The thing is though, like I mentioned, almost every piece of music you've ever listened to is in 12-tone equal temperament. So although these intervals are slightly out of tune, they're just in tune enough that we don't really perceive any sort of difference when we listen to our music. So hopefully this video has at least in part answered the question of why Western music generally uses just 12 notes. For such a simple sounding question, the answer can actually be quite confusing, being a tangle of history, physics, and human preference. And of course, you don't have to stick to just 12 notes. Microtonality, for example, is music that uses notes beyond and between the 12 standard pitches. And many non-Western cultures around the world use completely different tuning systems. I'm actually planning a future video on how different cultures around the world approach tuning and pitch, so if you're trained in a non-Western style of music, I'd love to hear from you. Also, a big thanks goes to Modart, who gifted me a copy of their Pianotech software to help me make this video. Pianotech is a super versatile piano plugin that lets you tune your keyboard to any possible tuning. So I thought it would be fitting to wrap this video up with this piano piece that I composed in just intonation. And as always, a massive thank you goes to everybody who supports me on Patreon, including Adam Granger, Andre Sanstiaja, Andrew Brown, Andy Deacon, Austin Barrett, Austin Russell, Bob McKinstry, Brittany Parker, Bruce Mount, Cameron Oliveira, Chris Cabell, Christopher Ryan, Kieran Bennon, Darren Harvey, D. David Lee Fish, David Findiver, Dr. Darren Wicks, Eleanor Skorchenko, Esben Hansen, Eugene Leroy, Eyes, FD Hodor, Gilna Modatona, James Kao, J. Kuckensparger, Joe Watson, Jonas Soderstrom, Justin Bigger, Lavender Monroe, Meg Fellows, Melody Composer Squared, Michael Vivian, Nancy Gillard, Paul Miller, Paul Hazel, Peter Dunphy, Roger Clay, Sam Lynn, Steve Daly, Thomas Armstrong, Tim Beaker, Tim Payne, Toot, Vidad Flowers, and Vladimir Kodakov.
Inside my head, I thought that we were dead. You ain't by my side, but you still push me off the edge. How would I forget everything you did? Got me running backwards, feeling pain, I can't pretend. Cause all my life I wished for you, but you broke me. Yeah, you broke me. All this time I lived your life. Guess I'm hopeless. Guess I'm hopeless. Cause all my life I wished for.
Tanane nana, tane nane nana, tanane nana, tane nane nana, he tane 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 na guru.
What are you waiting for? It's nice to rest your eyes and maybe go outside. Grab a book and get some air. So what are you waiting for?
Adim biasa digunakan untuk kemas sebaya. Awak digunakan untuk berbicara dengan yang lebih tua agar terdengar lebih sopan. 1. Saya sama dengan denai awak Adin. Kalau kabar kakak mulia kalau carai dan dicabut-cabut besok tangan biri. Hati-hati sama orang Padang ngaji. Bahasa Rono kang ngano aja tu Baputa duo di pagana uda. Awak uranio santai bao bagara bisa bao serius apongai asalkan yang dibao oyo kayo karo kadaka muliago bianga abis tapakai padong apa kagak tuada suui udara di padang yang dingin dia perasaan dia keudangan. Kalau sampai kini angin ado uranan niwo jadi pakai karena mungkin godong karena bukan orang. Kapal na bayangan di darat. Kapango apa ang laki-laki najaga tidak harus kutia. Pokoknya apa yang terjadi jangan taruh. Awak nio cari karago yang lama bianga jadi gadang. Kato ama bianga ndak rasa bana asa ngai orang awak. Bundo selalu doakan kenai. Tambah sie nan kayo ndak barado nasuk kayo banyak.